So, welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success story series of interviews, where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes, their challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to have with us Paul Ridgway, who's founder and director at The Curve. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming on board and spending some time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, The Curve, what you do, how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so my name's Paul. Me and James, my brother, founded The Curve 6.5 years ago. Um, we call ourselves a tech consultancy, and nobody really knows what that means.
Yeah.
It's quite a vague term, but most of what we do is building technology solutions for our customers, for usually businesses.
Yep.
And most of those tech solutions are software products of some sort. So that might be mobile apps, that might be web applications. Sometimes it's more exotic. There's sometimes elements of hardware involved, IoT. Lots of shifting towards kind of data and AI as well these days.
Yep.
Um, and the place that we really help our customers most is where if they're not particularly technical, but they know they need a technology solution of some
Yep.
sort, we can help them unpick the business domain and the problem they've got, because ultimately that's where a lot of these projects are rooted,
Yep.
and then work it forwards into what a solution might look like. You know, is that an app? Is that a web portal? Is that something else? And it's best ultimately when our customers come to us without a preconception of what they want to build. It's just here's a problem we're trying to solve. And that work then kind of it has two key forms. One is on the B2B side, it's more digital transformation. So
Yep.
improving operational efficiency, moving people away from paper or kind of hideous spreadsheets, all that sort of stuff. And that's usually an internal product or an internal tool,
Yep.
for a company or a team to use. And then the more B2C side or B2B2C is when somebody actually wants to build an app or product to go out into the wider market.
Yep.
You still start with the problem. You're solving someone's problem, whether it's your own businesses or somebody, the public's. The consultancy and the build process is largely similar, and then the life cycle beyond that kind of is too. Because if you've got a product out there in the world, it's got to stay relevant. It's probably got to evolve to
Yep.
do so. And so there's usually work to be done after that first bit of software build project work. And the same is true of like an internal tool. If it's powering a critical business process and that process evolves, um, that's that's then when you need to evolve the software to make it work. Because otherwise, you end up in a position if you don't maintain it, don't evolve it, is similar to if you're just going to use an off-the-shelf application. It does what it does, and if it doesn't quite do what you need, you kind of bend your processes or you bend how you use it to make it work.
Yep.
So for us, our value comes in at least in the kind of digital transformation space when somebody is outgrown or can't find an off-the-shelf solution,
Yes.
and it's important enough to their business to invest in something that is
Yep.
tailored for them.
That makes perfect sense. So do you and during that process, do you ever I'm just interested to know if you ever sort of go, you're doing it this way. Is there any, identify better ways of doing things practically that you could support as well?
Always. So, 9 times out of 10, somebody will come to us and say, I need you to build apps. And the first thing we need to do is wind them back from that idea of they want to build this specific thing.
Yep.
What's the problem?
Brilliant.
Um, it's not very innovative. We run a process called discovery. Quite a few other consultancies do the same sort of thing and call it the same sort of thing. But that's where we're winding back to the problem. We're trying to work forward to a solution. And
Great.
in a lot of times, so the building a product is kind of the easy one because it's usually greenfield, you've got fresh ideas, you've got to figure out what fits. The digital transformation side is you've got different stakeholders, they often don't see eye to eye, they've got different views on how the world works. And so with a lot of that, it's not just unpicking the business and the problem, it's actually understanding, why do you do things this way? Is there a better way to do it? Ignore the tech, but do you actually know why you do it this way? And often it's just what everyone's always done. So we end up dealing with kind of people challenges, process challenges, and once you get that bit slicker, leaner,
Yep.
then you maybe layer in the tech to at the end of the day, you want to digitize a good process. You don't want to digitize something that's clunky and slow because you just
Yeah.
want to make clunky and slow thing a little bit more digital.
No, absolutely. It's interesting. It's sort of my background was originally in things like systems analysis, etc. And a long time ago. Don't know any of it anymore, so I'm not gonna be asking you any questions or make any statements about it. But yeah, I think it's really valuable when we can add in that. Okay, this is how you've always done it, but are you well open to the idea that there might be better ways?
Yeah.
So if you were to describe your perfect client, what would be some of the features that would make up a great client for you?
Um, yeah, it's a good question. And to be honest, we're a lot of things to a lot of people. We don't specialize massively, so we
Yep.
grapple with this question plenty anyway. We're better with a larger business, but not enterprise.
Yep.
Kind of it's a bit of a weird term, mid-size, kind of few hundred people, maybe tens to hundreds of millions in terms of turnover, something like that. The small businesses usually have one problem. So when you solve it, you're kind of done. They're happy, but
Yes.
it's a one-hit thing. Whereas the slightly larger businesses, if you can demonstrate value in one area, you can likely progress into other areas
Yes.
and help other people. Bespoke software and what we do, it's not the cheapest thing. Consultancy isn't the cheapest thing.
Yeah.
So again, a business of a certain size is more likely to have a suitable budget for something like this. More people you usually have more problems. Doesn't really matter what industry you're in. And so especially a lot of the digital transformation stuff, again, it starts to add more value and become more useful when you've got tens or hundreds of people trying to collaborate together. The way we look at this generally is that, we bring the technology domain. So we almost find we work better with clients who are less technical inherently and don't have a desire to try and do some of this in-house, because you don't always get a conflict. But it's sometimes advantageous to be an outsider coming in, not knowing their business and domain and asking all the dumb questions, and then fleshing it out and then providing that tech capability with a fresh pair of eyes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. It's quite similar to what we do as in a business coaching arena, is asking lots of great dumb questions, because quite often people are doing things the way they've always done it because they've always done it that way. And yet the technology, the market was different 20 years ago. And so it's not fit for purpose. And there's so many businesses that are, have unfortunately gone by the wayside because they've always done it that way. Even whether it's Blockbuster or Woolworths or MFI or all these sorts of companies, they've always had the business model ultimately work really well at a certain point, but they didn't adapt and adopt. They didn't recognise change. So absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So it's flexible people that it sounds like also that trust you to be the experts in what you do rather than tell you what to do.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. We work well with internal technical teams if they exist.
Great.
A very small slice of our work is providing augmented capability, so basically extra people into somebody else's team. We just don't add so much value that way. It's just like having another person. And the thing that we enjoy really is working through that problem space from start to finish and seeing the outcomes, which you only really do if you can do that whole journey. And that's why I described it earlier how I did. That's where we add the most value, and that's kind of what we look at is really we want to do stuff that's interesting for us and good for the customer.
Yeah. In
the same vein, if somebody came to us and says, "Oh, I need a bog standard e-commerce solution," we wouldn't sell them a platform build for something like that.
Yes.
So, use Shopify or something like that. There's no point reinventing the wheel for the 1,000th time unless you've actually got a really good use case to do it.
Yes. No, that makes absolute sense. So, Paul, if we look backwards for a little while, for a little while, if you could tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got into business, and why this particular one for you.
Yeah, interesting, I guess, sequence of various events that led up to this. Way back when, I don't know, when I was about 8, was messing around with computers. Ended up learning to program through a strange set of circumstances. Going through one of these things where you get badges for doing different achievements and so on. These are the non-digital type of badges, obviously going back a while.
Yep.
I mean, it's nearly 30 years now. One of them was around kind of computing skills and programming, and so I ended up learning how to write some really basic, really novice programs for that. And once I got this badge, I did keep doing it. I did find it interesting, and I wanted to keep getting better. I kind of bumbled around doing that for while I was a kid and stuff, and then got to about 14 or 15, and that was the time when people heard you could program and you could do a website. You kind of got small business owners maybe approaching through, relations or parents or whatever, and saying, can your son do this? And I ended up doing a couple of websites, a few e-commerce things. This would be back around, I don't know, early 2000s-ish, when people were still using horrendous stuff like WorldPay, and everything was done in PHP or classic ASP. And there was no standards compared to what there are now.
Yeah.
There wasn't any of that maturity. And, I was doing that alongside school and all that. And then it came down to university time. And so I picked computer science as a degree because I thought it would be straightforward. So, I could already program. Wasn't as straightforward as I would hoped, but it was still, an interesting few years. Came out of that with a master's in software engineering. Got a job in London working for a well-funded startup. Didn't really enjoy much of that. So I worked in London, didn't live in London just because the cost was kind of commuting in and
Yep.
out. And that was a time drain. The company I worked for was nice, but my boss, he liked to tell people what needed doing, which is fair, but also how he wanted it doing. And one of the interesting things, or one of the things I like about writing code is, there's a creativity to it in a
Yes.
different kind of way you're problem solving. And so if you're told how to do stuff to the nth degree, it takes a lot of the satisfaction out of the
Yep.
problem solving.
Get that.
So between those few things, I didn't stick around at that job very long. Moved back to Sheffield because I had no other attachment to being down south really, other than that job. Ended up joining a university spin out ish, which then founded another company, which wasn't a university spin out, but it was kind of linked to the university. It was a bit of a weird sequence of events. So me and two others ended up being kind of the founding team on that.
Yeah.
And I started as the only person writing code. And as the years went by, I then ended up running a small team of developers, which then became quite a big team of developers. Kind of fast forward 7 or 8 years from that, my team was about 90 or so, kind of 10 teams of different sizes, all in the kind of delivery and engineering space. My role by that point was CTO, so I wasn't doing a lot of hands-on stuff. I was doing lots of meeting clients and prospects and travel and all that sort of stuff. And I ended up leaving at about the same time as James, who my brother, who co-founded The Curve with me. And
Yep.
we got a lot of experience to that journey. So James ran two of the teams that reported into me at the time. So we had strong technical background, but we'd also learned to work with customers. We had to do
Great.
our customers in that space were all insurance companies. So it was a very interesting way of trying to get requirements out of people who weren't used to talking about software.
Yes.
We were
Yeah.
ultimately providing these mobile apps that do the driver scoring and behavioral coaching, all that sort of stuff. And insurance companies aren't, or back then they weren't really used to having a digital presence like that.
Yes.
So there was all of that. There was the BD side. We had exclusivity with Direct Line in the UK, so we had to go further afield to find other business. So there was a lot of travel to the US, Europe.
Right.
Did a bit of a stint trying to sell into China, which ultimately didn't work out, but it was an interesting
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. I bet.
So when we both ended up leaving, it was like, well, what do we do now? I ended up applying for a couple of jobs, including the likes of Infinity Works, who very famously sold to Accenture
Yep.
towards the end of COVID. And we just thought, after doing some interviews, and there's stuff out there, but I wasn't massively sold on working for a bigger company, having had a lot of autonomy over the last 8 years. Technically I had a couple of people I reported to, but I had so much autonomy in what I did.
Yes.
Going and joining somewhere like Google, where you'd be a tiny piece of a huge machine, while the interview process and everything else was really, really interesting, it didn't really feel right. Infinity Works was a particularly interesting one because they also offered me a role. But this was the time I had already committed with James that we were going to do something. I was kind of just seeing out the process. But I'm kind of pleased that I didn't go that way as well, because I'm sure Infinity Works was great cultural work and everything, but then the acquisition by Accenture, I think, would have been that wouldn't have been interesting so much for me.
Yes.
And obviously a lot of other people then left after that point.
Yeah.
So that was kind of our catalyst, is using the experience that we had from a past life to basically start a consultancy, not the same as the likes of Infinity Works and others. There was a very unique sequence of events and things that they did that led to that success. And we've done things a little bit differently. Some of it's deliberately, some of it's not. But as I say, we work with less technical businesses. We take more projects in house and deliver them as a whole.
Yep.
Which wasn't their kind of starting approach by comparison.
Yeah.
But that got us to now. Basically, it was very, I don't know. It was a very naive move at the time, just to think, well, let's set up by ourselves and see what we can achieve. And we gave ourselves 3 months and basically said, if we can pay ourselves within 3 months, we'll keep going.
Brilliant.
Bit longer. Within the first year, we had somebody contracting for us at first, but then became an employee when we were comfortable with what we perceived as the risk in that. Hit COVID with about 5 or 6 employees, and I think we were a bit small to capitalize on some of the big digital transformation push that came from COVID that fueled the growth of others.
Yeah.
But we did benefit from the fact that everything went online. So networking, BD,
Yes.
doing
Yep.
deals, all that sort of stuff.
Of course.
We gained one customer through COVID who we only met in person for the first time just before New Year's this year. So, that shows how much it changed. And our team grew through those 2 years as well. We went from 6 to 16 people. So it
Well done.
wasn't bad for us.
No.
We worked with the things we could. So, we hired remotely because there was no point worrying about developers in Sheffield when you don't know when you'll be back in the office.
No.
And that kind of just went from there.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So and so that's 6 to 16 in COVID. And where are you now?
Coming up to 30, either
Well
29 or
done.
30, something like that. It's at that point where I don't know the exact number anymore because it does ebb and flow enough.
It's funny. My first business, we grew up to over 100 people, and there were different stages when the first 5 to 10 you knew them, you
Yeah.
knew their family, you knew their kids, you even knew the dogs' names, and then you get to this point at some point when you go, who's that, and somebody's just joined and you don't even know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, in the last place where so my team was 90 previously, and the company overall was about 120.
Yeah,
And yeah, I remember the point when I started forgetting people's names,
yeah,
and I had to. I think we got to about 50 or 60 before that really started happening. But I
yes,
had people joining what was effectively my team, but it was a couple of layers under me, sort of thing. And yeah, that was a very weird feeling
yes.
because the leadership team would take turns to do like the weekly team meeting and stuff like that, and there'd always be different announcements. So and so's joined, and when you got to a point where people had to put their hands up so you could identify who the new person was and stuff like that, it got a
I
bit.
guess, yeah, hands up if you've not been here very long.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's funny. I remember quite well that because we were based in Harrogate, and our first Christmas dinner was four of us around the table in the pub.
yeah,
Yeah, and the last one was when we ended up having partners come to those events. So the last one we couldn't fit in anywhere in Harrogate. We couldn't find anywhere big enough, so we
yeah.
had to go outside town, and that was quite a realization of what we created was quite strange, really. I have to say, looking back in hindsight from very, very, very small starts. So, look, you mentioned a few challenges you've had, but looking back over that period, what are the biggest challenges that you'd say you've had to overcome?
Um, the One of the biggest ones that was also probably the biggest business risk was really delegating properly.
Yep.
I'm
Yes.
not, it doesn't sound so. The founder of the previous business, it was his idea, but he wasn't technical, so he couldn't do any of it. So all he could do was go out and sell, and
Yep.
that was great, apart from when he sold stuff that was hard to deliver. Um, Whereas for me, the challenge as we scaled is I could still do the stuff, and so I kind of clung on to the things that I could do and held on to this fallacy that, and I've seen other people do it since as well. I know it wasn't just me, but held on to this fallacy that if I do it, I'll do it better, which was probably true at the time, or possibly true. But then I didn't do it quicker because I had other things to do. And by
Yes.
not letting other people do it, they then didn't learn. So even if they make a mistake the first time or not do it as well the first time, you never start that learning process, that
Yeah.
delegating kind of leads to. And we were years in before I really had to just kind of let go of everything and make a conscious effort to stop
Yeah.
fighting. And I think some of it was, if I'm not doing that, then what's my value? And when I'd come from doing a lot of hands-on stuff, and what the company really needed was for me to do other stuff that's not hands-off, like meeting prospects and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. It was kind of difficult at the time to transition how that value was to what it was needed
Yes.
in the future. So that was a tricky one, and I'm pleased to say I haven't fallen into that trap this time round or since, because I'm quite happy to kind of hand stuff off and let people
Great.
make some mistakes because that's the process of learning. And then fortunately I kind of spot it in others a bit better now that I've been through it myself, and help other people to when they need to start delegating
Great.
so it grows. That was a big one, and that was challenging at the time, but in hindsight I can see if I'd done it differently, how we probably could have done things better in different ways. And so
Yeah.
another key one was people. We touched on it earlier and joked about it. More people is more problems.
Oh, yeah.
It really is. When we had 10 people, you knew everybody, you knew the dogs, you knew everything about them. Everybody got on usually at that sort of size.
Yes.
Even if they didn't completely, it was just there wasn't enough probably social pressure and stress to
Yeah.
And then as you got to milestones 15, 30, 60, whatever, and then we got to a point where, you started making bad hires maybe,
Yeah.
because as you're growing, you make concessions, and you shouldn't. Or one of the mistakes we made was we hired skill over culture, or over kind of cultural fit.
Yeah. Yes.
And so we learned collectively a bit late down the road, you can train people, you can teach them skills and all that, but you can't really teach decency and culture if somebody's not
No.
wired that way. And so, we brought some people into the team who were technically really, really good, but they didn't work, they didn't play well with others.
Yeah.
And so the people stuff as the company grew was a general challenge. It's just, it's the most complex thing of having a business, no matter what you do, whether it's tech or something else, is there's a impossible balance between keeping people happy, but not being, maybe not being too generous. You still need people to work for what they, there's a job to do at the end of the day,
Yep.
sort of stuff. So that was a fun evolution. And when you get big enough, you get all sorts of different problems creeping in one way or another. The most challenging one I had to get involved in letting somebody go because other people in the team couldn't get involved for various reasons, and that was a very fun Christmas sort of time.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, it was good timing.
I can empathise.
But that was a very valuable lesson, like the delegation one. Learning how to deal with those scenarios. Because when you're a small company, you just wing it, and you probably do half a dozen things that may be risky from an HR point of view at the time. And as you get bigger, you have to figure out how to do these things properly, by the book and all that sort of stuff. And we had at the last place, we had a really good, really experienced HR director. So James and I both learned a lot from her.
Yeah.
That's definitely helped in how we're going to approach people this time round, because we looked at it very differently. And with a consultancy, the quality of the work we do is the sum of the people doing the work, really.
Yep.
There's no, unlike a product startup or something else, there's a limited big picture vision as to what we can be. It's a consultancy. It's only going to be so many things.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
the place where we put a lot of time and effort, because we don't have this big, unicorn product vision or something that we're going to raise funding for, and all that sort of stuff. We put a lot of effort into making sure that the culture's good, training and support and all that. And if we hadn't done the last business first, I think we'd have we made a right mess of people on this, because once you start growing, it becomes a lot more sensitive.
Yeah. And it creates its own identity, doesn't it? If we don't manage it well, and it could just spin off into different directions quite quickly, if we don't understand how to keep things in play. No, that makes perfect sense. And so obviously, whether it's from the challenges you faced or other areas, what are the biggest learnings you've got about growing a business?
There's in the last place, we were very focused on kind of tech and delivery. So I spoke to prospects and then did go to conferences and stuff like that, but we never really did any. I was never involved in marketing. We never did any what you maybe call conventional selling. A lot of it was from relationships and these conferences and stuff like that. So it was a fairly warm sales process. You build up relationships with people before you actually started trying to get them to buy anything and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, we were never really exposed, James or I, to that kind of more commercial side of the business. We were on the delivery side, and so we didn't really learn about sales processes, marketing. Had exposure to finance, but maybe not the details.
The detail stuff. Yeah.
There's a lot of, I think, to be able to, unless you can afford to buy a big team straight away because you've got some financial backing or something like that. There's a lot of little things that you need to be good at to scale a business, especially in the early stages.
Yeah.
We've had to learn a lot of that on the fly. I think we came into this with a good amount of experience, but it was all in one very focused area.
Yeah.
And I think, kind of keeping on top of all those little best practices, here's some marketing stuff you should be thinking about before you can actually afford to hire a marketing person. Or here's the finance stuff you should be thinking about before you can afford to hire an FD. Or
absolutely.
They kind of lay out the challenge that way. We've got to a size now where it's less acute. We can afford to bring in external advisors and so on, but it's that classic you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And my degree was computer science. I've not done anything in the business space. Probably, in hindsight, if I was going to start my own business from scratch and not have a great plan, which was part of the challenge at the start, we were just testing our abilities. we'll be able to have a better grounding in just that general stuff.
Yeah,
That was one of our bigger challenges, but we picked up along the way, and we're really fortunate. We've got a really good group of advisors who sit kind of around the board,
brilliant,
so we've been able to backfill a lot of that expertise as well.
brilliant. Well, speaking of which, I think you're aware we're a business coaching organisation, so I am keen to know the best coaches you've had, whether that's business, sport, life in general, who has had the biggest impact on you.
It's varied over time. I think different stages
Yep.
of life, business, what have you. Probably the most notable period when I went into actually started working. So the previous business, the prior startup, I worked very closely with the COO there. He was, I don't know, 40 years older than me, 30, 40, something like that. He worked in some very big businesses, had a lot of life experience, all that sort
Yep.
of stuff. Learned a lot from him, definitely. And then I think James and I have been very independent in the first few years running the curve. It's not that we were resistant to outside advice, but I think people have to work fairly hard to earn our trust historically.
Yep.
We're not gonna kind of open up to loads of people and go and seek loads of advice. It's just not in our nature, which is possibly to our detriment. But Paul Howell, who's the chair of our board, he very much earned that place through kind of months of doing lightweight coaching type activities.
Yep.
Just helping us with little bits like getting a strategy together, getting a better formal process in place for our board meetings, just little bits of governance and things like that.
Brilliant.
And that got us the confidence in him and built that trust that we were then happy to have him come on board as chair. And he's got more involved over the years, so we work very, very close with him. But there's a few other people. We list them all on our website, but we've got Melise, who actually joined us at the start, but has since retired. Very interesting career life that she's had. Started in the US in the Navy, I believe, ended up working in the Pentagon, and
Right.
was part of one of the founding companies behind the internet and all sorts of interesting things. Came over here, worked for PlusNet, built up a really, really good network. So when we set up shop, she was our best but unofficial salesperson because she didn't see herself as a salesperson.
Yeah, yeah.
And then got a couple of other people who advise us. We've got a guy called Glyn who's been very successful in the IT space, very commercially minded sales, that sort of stuff. He's started off as a customer, ironically, and has transitioned to an advisor. And then John as well, who's he's worked in a lot of consultancies, so he's very operationally focused around consultancies. But
yeah,
all of them we've been able to take plenty away from and apply it to the business. And then we also work with a marketing consultant called Bethan, who's been invaluable because we just didn't have that background. And when you don't know what you don't know, that sort of stuff, I think marketing is more an art than any of the other stuff I've listed. The world moves a lot. You kind of predicting, guessing, adapting to where trends are and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And like I say, it's an art thing. So right, so that's been very useful.
Brilliant. And whether it's from them or any other sources, do you have any favourite quotes or sayings about business or success that you catch yourself using a lot?
They're probably all pretty cliched and cheesy, to be honest. You don't know what you don't know. I think you don't know what you don't know is one of the biggest ones. Like if you don't know to ask a question, all that stuff. I think loads of people can get caught out by assuming they know enough, but they don't know. And that's one of the things that we often end up unpicking a lot with our customers. They make assumptions based on things they don't know by omission, not deliberately.
Yes.
A very prevalent one, the polite version is garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
That's true of software requirements. That's true of Googling. That's true of, generative AI, ChatGPT, all the hype now. We often get asked for advice, input, all that sort of stuff on those sorts of topics. And the first thing people get wrong is they don't ask a robust enough question.
Yes.
But then the same comes true in what we do. So in the early days, we built software around rubbish requirements. That was our fault. We've massively evolved and improved the process. But back in the day, we were doing fixed cost projects around half-assed requirements, and again, garbage in, garbage out. The software. The software did what the requirements said, but the requirements didn't really capture what the customer needed.
Yeah.
Those are probably the big two that are relevant to what we do. I'm not otherwise much for kind of quotes and sayings. I
No,
won't
it's all good.
talk about that.
I collect them. I just like collecting them. But no, yeah, I can totally get that point about rubbish in, rubbish out. But we have a phrase in Action Coach which I think is relevant to across the number of things, which is the meaning of my communication is the response that I get.
Yeah.
It's like, so if you don't, if you don't blame, if you don't get the answer you want, then ask a better question.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the key thing. Don't blame the other person for not getting it. So no, I totally get that. And what about books or podcasts? Anything that you've read or listened to recently that you can recommend?
Um, yeah. So I get through a lot of books, and most of them are businessy and quite dry. I really need to get better at listening to podcasts. I like audiobooks. It's a good way to consume
Yes.
information, but I've never really got into the podcast thing. Best book that I've listened to because I don't read anything. And from years of using a computer, I'm actually terrible at reading because I don't read linearly anymore. That's not how you use a computer. You jump
Okay.
around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Interesting.
audiobooks. We do quite a bit of work in the manufacturing space. There's a lot of scope for digitization
Yeah.
and digital transformation, all that sort of jazz. And there's a relatively famous but older book called The Goal, which is about operational efficiency in
Yeah.
manufacturing, and it's an interesting one because it's done in the format of a novel as a story, but there's a
Okay.
kind of there's obviously a deeper meaning and a process behind it. And when I started listening to it, is an American version. It's very, very cheesy. Like there's cheesy, probably, I don't know, 80s music in it and all sorts of stuff like that. First 20, 30 minutes in, I was thinking, I'm not sure I've got myself into. But because it was done in the form of a novel rather than just a load of dry facts about business and stuff like that, it was actually
Yeah.
quite engaging, and I found myself finding time to listen to it. So
Yeah.
doing activities where I could actually listen to the audiobook rather than something else.
Yes.
And I think it's kind of relevant to wider businesses and problems because it's around optimization and it does focus on manufacturing, but a lot of these things that when you're trying to fix a problem, it's not always the thing that's in your face that is where the issue is. It could be
Yeah.
upstream, downstream, could be people, processes. So that was one of the best things that I remember listening to recently. I've got a long list of other stuff that I've listened to over the years, but not much of it stands out. I think with a lot of this stuff, you take bits
Yes.
and pieces, little snippets.
Cherry
Some of it
pick.
applies,
Yeah.
plenty of it doesn't. And you listen to, I don't know, 10 hours of stuff, and you maybe get 2 hours of value or something
Yeah.
like that. But it's interesting hearing the other ways that people look at things.
Yes.
The other one I think it's horrendously dry, and I really struggle to get through it, but I think it's quite interesting. Is Surrounded by Idiots.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Behavior profiling. Yeah.
Based on, we did the disc profiling at the last place, and
Yeah.
it was really useful actually to see how people were different. It broke. We got to a size where personality and stuff like that was becoming a challenge more
Yeah.
because people had different styles when we got
Yes.
bigger. And while it wasn't a silver bullet by any stretch, it certainly was helpful to to see how people were different in their styles and their behaviors and how they expected things to be. Obviously, Surrounded by Idiots is a very long explanation of all of that stuff.
Yes.
Very robust, one could say. But I'd say that's quite good for somebody who's not come across those sorts of kind of
Yeah.
profiling type techniques, and it's quite accessible. Obviously, if you've got a small team and you want to figure out how they can work together potentially better.
I would agree completely. It is interesting talking a couple of things that you mentioned. So I remember I went to an event a couple of years ago, and a lady called Jennifer Byrne was speaking, or she was being interviewed, I should say. And she was ex-CTO at Microsoft quite a few years ago. I think she overlapped with Bill Gates, but not that that's particularly important. But she was on the board at Microsoft. And two things that stood out. One was team. The word team is just a construct. It's actually lots of relationships between individuals. So it is. So therefore, understanding and starting to build those relationships is key. And there is a. I've got a table somewhere I can show you, but it literally the number of relationships in a team as a team grows exponentially.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah,
it's something like I don't know. So, you know, if there's three people, there's three relationships. If there's 10 people, there's something like 31 relationships or something going on, and it's just like it just goes into this mass. But the other thing she said, which leads on to something else, was that well, it goes back a little bit to your when you were talking about delegation. She said it really stuck with me, especially for business, the sort of people that I work with, is that she said in the US, when they recruit C-suite executives, they now test them on their ability not to do things.
right.
And you know, I took from that not to not get things done, but get things done through others, not do
Yeah,
them themselves. And I think, you know, that's a really interesting. That's a bit of a mess up, I think, for many founders and business owners in that they probably got to where they are right now by being about how hard they work and how well they worked. But getting to the next level is about something completely different.
it's interesting because yeah, at the last place, I worked some long hours. You know, got a lot done, arguably. Um, Often worked evenings, often worked weekends, and this time round, my goal is not to do that. Even though I've got more of a stake in this business than the last one, um, it's not really scalable if you have to put your entire life into it.
No, no,
And
it's interesting, isn't it? When you realise that, it sort of really changes the whole sort of paradigm of how I grow my business. If I make it
yeah,
about me, then I'm probably screwed.
yeah, I think there's some kind of, I don't know, vanity badge of honor in going through all that pain and suffering through it.
Yes.
But and I think that's also fine at a stage, but you've got to be on board with the fact that, that's not, that can't be the norm. That might get you over that first year or get you to that first big deal. But if you're not planning to get rid of yourself, and you know, this is our challenge in some years' time, is James and I need to make ourselves dispensable so that we could actually exit, sell, let the business go on by itself, whatever we choose
100%.
to do. And that is a key bit of our focus from kind of a year or so ago onwards to make sure that we're slowly building towards it.
So, by coincidence, so our definition of a true business action coach is a commercial, profitable enterprise that works without its owners.
Mm,
Now, it rarely can it start like that. So it
mm,
starts as a job, you know, a job, and job's great, and it might be one we enjoy and one pays us a lot of money. But ultimately, if we want a business, it's got to be without us. And I often say can work without us because I often meet people that love what they do so much they would never actually not want to be involved, which is fine. But when the business depends on us 24, not even 24/7, but even 40 hours a week,
yeah,
it's still a job, not a business.
yeah. We have some good tests like, you know, can you go on holiday for 2 weeks and you know not check your phone or not have to check your phone? As you say, some people will still check it, but
Yes.
can you go away for 2 weeks and largely switch off and things like that? And there was a period, I think it was either last year, I think it must have been last year, maybe the year before. James and I both had holiday that overlapped, and that was a good test.
Right.
Yeah, so it was a first.
Well
Um,
done. Well
but
done,
yeah,
yeah.
it went fine. Yeah, so you know, and I think those are the funny things. It's like the delegating thing, isn't it? You know, once you test the waters and it works, it
Yeah.
gets a lot easier to do. But doing it that first time,
Absolutely. It's like oh, okay, nothing. And you know, I think I don't know who said it, I think Branson might have said it, but I think it was said probably before then. But the idea is, firstly, yeah, is to become dispensables, dispensable, so we can select and train our successor and move to the next level, whether that's up within the business or out of the business for owners. But also, our job is to recruit people that are better at their job than we are at their job.
definitely, yeah,
And I think but that comes, as you mentioned, ego earlier. Ego often is a barrier to doing that because you know, I have met plenty of people that don't really, subconsciously at least, want people that are better than them in the business.
yeah.
That's a massive trap.
Yeah. We over the years saw that a lot, and as you say, it's you need it, and you've got to be open to it if you want it to grow, because you can't. If you're the best person there in the team, in the business, whatever, then you're already kind of destined to be
Yep,
stuck.
you're locked in. You're absolutely locked in. I couldn't agree more. So, looking forward, then, Paul, what does the future like for you guys, and what challenges do you think you might face, if any?
Oh, I'm sure we'll face challenges. There's probably no question about that. I mean, we started in what was it, 2018, 2019, one or two, early 2019. So we had, what was it, 10 months before COVID hit,
Yeah.
about 12 months before lockdown probably hit.
Goodness.
And then in between that, we've had Ukraine, energy costs, which is obviously related, different governments, various uncertainties, different US governments, extra uncertainty. One of the challenges of going up the ladder to the bigger customers is those geopolitical things have a bigger impact.
Yeah.
So there's all that. That's obviously not going away at the moment. We've got too much uncertainty all over the shop.
Yeah.
We're growing the consultancy side in a relatively steady and organic way. So we've never taken any investment, outside money, anything like that. So all the growth we've had so far is organic, which reinvests in people. Really, that's our main cost.
Yeah.
We are ultimately looking at diversifying what we do to an extent. We remain within the tech space and all that kind of adjacent industry type stuff. But there's other areas that, as a consultancy, we wouldn't touch, but our customers do need, whether it's around things like broader support for maybe IT or software solutions they've got.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is a big topic. So while we build solutions with security in mind, there's more that, again, our potential customers need in that space. At the moment, we do things like data as part of the projects that we do, the work we do, but there's independent work available in the data space. So we are ultimately going to look to grow by diversifying what we do, bringing in different capabilities, and also then a different revenue mix, because the consultancy stuff is quite hand to mouth. It's not often viewed as good quality revenue unless you've got some very long contracts. Bringing in some more service capability and things like that will help us diversify the mix a little bit, and should increase the value of the business and so on. I think we've got an interesting opportunity to apply the digital transformation type techniques we use with our customers to those lines of business as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
A lot of IT support and some of these other things is, they're not necessarily super sophisticated or as much as they could be, because they don't have the ability in house. And
yes,
as an independent business, they might not be able to justify the expenditure in building out, bespoke tooling or something. Whereas as part of a wider business, as an internal cost, that's a very different consideration. We every now and then we delude ourselves that we might actually productize some of the stuff we've done. We've got some internal tools we've built for doing things like time tracking, resource planning. We run a lot of our operations, in fact, through one internal tool that we've built, because we got to a size where off the shelf was either insanely expensive versus the internal cost of building something.
Yes.
Or it wasn't fit enough for purpose that we'd have to modify how we work, which would then compromise how we work and the efficiency down. Whether that'll happen, I don't know, because products, it's a very different way of selling and marketing, and it's probably a big distraction. But it'd be quite interesting in future if we got to a point where we were comfortable that the core business was stable, and we can maybe have a look at productizing something that we think is useful to the wider market. But that's it, kind of as we have thought about at the moment. We're working on a plan towards 2030, at which point we aspire to be in a position where we can then look at either selling or perhaps taking on something like private equity for growth, depending on how everybody feels about things at the time. If we're bored of it by then, sale is possibly the angle. And I kind of subscribe to, again, it's another one of these cliche things that, if you're doing something day in, day out and it's becoming boring, it's not a good job for
100%.
For someone's kind of well-being and all that sort of stuff. So all the while it's interesting, I think we'll keep going. But if it does actually start to feel like a chore and, a conventional job, that's the point that we might think about. Do we move on and do something else?
Yeah, brilliant. And I think, what I found is creating something that works without you gives you that choice every day, every week, every month. And it can, it could be, it's interesting how quickly that feeling of boredom or almost resentment of the business can happen almost overnight with an event that happens and going, but I can't do, and so I think prepping for it's pretty good. And final question, what would be the best advice you could give an 18-year-old you, Paul, if you could go back in time and do that?
So that's the one question that I did spend some time pondering, because the rest I skimmed the list and thought, well, I can talk about that easily now. I'm not too sure, to be honest. The best thing I've come up with so far, and it's a little bit cynical, is looking at the way the world is now, so it's with the benefit of hindsight as well. I probably question whether going to university was the right thing. It wasn't a bad time or anything like that, but I don't think I think it could have been a better spent 4 years because it was an undergrad
Yeah,
master's. It's four instead of three. Um, well, I mean, the sequence of things after would have been completely different. Obviously, if I didn't go, wouldn't have probably done the previous startup and then this business. But I think, yeah, I do wonder now because engineering, software engineering, etc. I think it's moved away from an academic thing. It's very mainstream. It's very vocational. And if anybody asked me now, for example, my opinion, I'd say if you want to get into software, probably don't go to uni.
no,
There's better ways
yes,
to become a software engineer, definitely. So giving my 18-year-old self that advice might be a bit more risky, but the one thing I do ponder from time to time is whether that 4 years could have been better spent building a startup, building a
yeah,
product, joining an early stage team and getting a head start on all this experience. Because I did learn some stuff at uni, don't get me wrong. Went to Sheffield and it was a good time, but I'm not sure how much it's helped me in the way that the world of software and technology has evolved so fast.
yeah,
We struggle to keep up. I struggle to keep up as somebody who's in it every day.
yeah,
Open the whatever news app in the morning and there's a new AI thing, there's a new this, that, and the
yeah,
other. There's we've got a talk that we've done around uh, whether we think AI is going to take the job of a developer. James did the talk at Sheffield AI, but he did a bit of research for that. And back when we started learning to program, there were maybe half a dozen mainstream programming languages and frameworks and stuff like that.
yeah.
Now there's hundreds,
Right.
and
Okay.
and that's ones that are considered to some degree mainstream. There'll be thousands, if not more, of just other things that people have cobbled together. So, when I graduated, the stuff that I learned, it was dated for two reasons. One, because a lot of the lecturers were already teaching stuff that was old.
Yes.
But then
Yeah.
the world has also just moved on and on and on. And, there's probably a version of Moore's law that applies to the wider tech ecosystem where things are just evolving faster and faster because
Yes.
more people are getting into it. There's more ability. There's a lot more brain power behind these things. There's a lot more compute power. You look how fast the generative AI stuff has come. It appeared out of almost nowhere a short
Yeah.
while ago, and now some of the things it can do is insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would really, and anybody, to be fair, unless they're going into something that does really require that level of education, and there certainly will be
Yeah.
things,
Yes.
medical degrees and so on. But certainly for something like this, that would be one of the things that I think twice about.
Yeah, I'm finding more and more people talk about that for certainly 18-year-olds now is what's the best route, especially given the costs, the debts that we come out of college with nowadays.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a difficult decision. It's a difficult thing to do, and as you said, the relevance of the education because it to be taught, it's got to be learned and known, and yet, what's going on in the world is advancing so fast. I don't know how universities can keep as up to it as maybe we could ourselves on the bits that we're most interested in. Fascinating. Uh, Paul, it's been fascinating to talk to you. It really has, and congratulations on where you are and where you've got the business too. And for anyone that's watching that would like to get in touch with you or the Curve, what would be the best way of doing that?
online will be easier. So thecurve.io is the website. If you Google us, you'll either find our website or a theatre in Leicester that's also called The Curve. We've had the odd few inquiries about tickets for seats and stuff like that. Other than that, I'm on LinkedIn. If you search Paul Ridgway The Curve, you'll find me in the company page. So you can message through that as well, but it's a bit of a noisy platform. So the two best routes, really.
Brilliant. Well, look, it'd be great to swing by another 6, 12 months and just see how things are developing and on the number of things that you talked about. But for now, thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.